So the execution is really what matters. And if it doesn't work, and even if it's poorly planned, and you look back on it and you're like, oh man, I barely planned that out. That was a terrible idea. At least you learned something from it, right? One of the shots you take will work out, right? As long as you keep trying.
Make your brand extra.
Asher, thanks so much for being here with me today to talk to our audience all about branding. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Me on, and I'm excited. So yeah, my name's Asher. I started my own social media agency probably about at the end of 2022, and I do branding for about 6 or 7 clients to date now. It really started. I was walking down the street and I was thinking to myself, after checking the profiles of so many different local businesses, what they're doing on social media. I saw that there's so much missed opportunity, and I knew that I could get more customers through their doors if I were to work with them. So that was really the inspiration behind my brand. And today, like I said, we have about 7 clients, and we're just going up.
That is so amazing. So tell me, you said you started at the end of 2022. How old are you right now?
So right now I'm 16. I turned 16 in August, so I was probably 15 then, right?
To start
Yeah.
to start a branding agency when you were 15, that's amazing. I love it. So I have 4 kids and we are instilling entrepreneurship in them. So to see you running a full-fledged business at 16, that is awesome. Good job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of things. That's a big thing that a lot of people miss is, you know, how important entrepreneurship is with young people, right? And teaching them that. So yeah, definitely instilling those values. And, a lot of my peers come to me. Sometimes they ask me for help, and I'm more than happy to help them. I love inspiring my peers because I think entrepreneurship is so, so important with young
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely. Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
Not really. I do have some relatives that are entrepreneurs. My parents always say they're like, don't credit me with that. They never take the credit for my entrepreneurial endeavors, even though my parents are amazing, by the way. They helped me so much. But really, I think it's to me, entrepreneurship is all about finding where you can add value to other people, whether they're, consumers or other businesses, right? Finding where you can add value and taking action on that. And I feel like that was something that I was just kind of born with. Like, as long as I can remember, like, I've sort of just had that in me. And I don't really know where it came from, to be honest, but it's there. And I'm so glad I leveraged it to my fullest potential.
Absolutely. I think you're right. Entrepreneurship and that drive to see a problem and know a solution that you can offer, that is a gift. And I think it's something that it's a spark that some people are born with. And I don't know that it can be taught. So I think that you have that in you and you have definitely nurtured it along the way. I think it's interesting that you say that your parents are not entrepreneurs. I fully expected you to get on here and be like, yeah, my parents run a business and that's where I learned everything. So that's super awesome. I love it. Um, as you
Yeah.
kind of noticed, you said you were walking down the street, and you kind of noticed how you could see the holes in people's businesses and how you could kind of patch them up and help get more people in their doors. Tell me
Mhm.
about some of the things, like what are the first things that you did to take action on that idea?
Yeah, so at first I started really just as a freelancer. I was referred to a real estate agent by a family friend. And by the way, I want to get into real estate when I'm older. That's why that was my first
Ah,
client. And I do work with real estate agents today, but I was working as a freelancer with him. And I think that was really the first step I took was just, trying to get someone to work with to sort of get the experience. Not only with social media, but just working with another business owner. And then from there, once I felt like, you know what, I got my bases covered, I was like, I really want to make this into my own brand and I want to help more brands on a greater scale. But I think that's really where it started.
that's great. I love that you want to get into real estate too. That's the pinnacle of of entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I love real estate, love looking at houses on Zillow.
me too.
I mean, that's not all of it, but yeah.
Me too. Me too. Do you want to get into like home ownership as far as being a landlord, or are you wanting to do more like commercial buildings, maybe a mix of both?
Yeah, that's something that I'm not sure about. Commercial or residential real estate. I'm like tied between the two, like what I want to get into. But I definitely want to be an agent and an investor as well in the future. So that's why I'm really trying to work with more realtors doing social media marketing, doing what I'm best at to learn what I eventually sort of want to break into.
Yeah, you are wise beyond your years.
Oh, thank you. I get that a lot.
Oh, I imagine you do. I imagine you do. Okay, so tell me about when you work with clients now. So you said you have 6 to 7, 7-ish clients that you're working with. Are you working with them on a retainer basis, or how do you have that structured in your business?
Yep. Yeah, so most of my clients, it is a retainer basis, just month to month. And yeah, it's pretty much like ongoing because, I believe that social media isn't a one-time thing. And I think a lot of companies they believe it is a one-time thing. Like we'll charge you a ton up front just to do it for a couple months and then we're done. I believe that, if you want to keep up a brand and let people know your doors are open, you should always be active on social media. And so that's why I structure my agreements like that with my client. So
Yeah.
most of my business is on a retainer basis.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think the most frustrating thing is when you're looking to go somewhere or to see if something is open and you look at their social media page and they haven't posted in 2 months and you're like, I don't even know if they're still, it says they're open, but who knows? They could not be open because they haven't posted anything for 2
Hmm.
months. We're seeing a trend. People are going more to social media pages than they are to Google to find out things about a business.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that you're on the money there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard something. I heard something where TikTok, and this is really interesting, amongst young people, TikTok was a more common search
Yeah,
engine than Google. Can
I
you
know.
believe
I
that?
actually just heard that too. I can't remember where I heard somebody
Yeah.
say that, but I heard the same thing this week, and I thought that was so interesting that yeah, I mean, we grew up Googling everything, so to think that you would go to TikTok to search for
Hmm.
something is bizarre to me, but, my kids probably go to TikTok more than they go to Google, so at least my
Yeah.
teenagers. When you come in contact with someone who you're trying to get as a new client, or you see a hole in their business and you see where you can fix something for them or be a solution to a problem they have, what's the first thing that you do for them?
So when I first get a new client, well, first when they reach out to me, I like to have a discovery call, and I like to get them sort of thinking like, how do they want to portray their brand, right? And what lens do they want to be seen? And because marketing without purpose, it's kind of useless. You need to have something unique about you. You need to have your own spin on something, and so I like to get both of us thinking, how do we want to portray your brand? What really will resonate, right? So we have that discovery call, and then what I like to do is I like to strategize a bit, write them up a proposal. Here's what I recommend, right? And even if they don't, sign on with me, at least it gives them some info to chew on down the road for other marketing efforts, right? So that's really what it looks like the onboarding process, and then in terms of when like we're actually working together. Um, you know, content creation is the first thing that I'll be doing. I like to create posts that I plan out a month in advance. Sometimes less than that. Sometimes it can be more off the cuff. But there's a content piece, researching relevant groups on Facebook, hashtag research. A lot of really digging deep to see what is going to work best in terms of distributing this content and it resonating.
That's excellent. The research part, I think, is key to what you're doing. I think a lot of people tend to create content without really thinking about who's going to see it or what,
Yeah.
does someone want to see it even? Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
key part of what you're doing, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think to elaborate on that, like I said, marketing without purpose, I just think it's useless, right? It needs to tie into a brand because a brand, what it really is like an association with something, right? So you need to really associate and integrate. Um, and a big part of that is consistency, right? So a consistent cadence of posting, right? Not posting it ton and then taking a huge break, right? And that's what a lot of business owners have trouble keeping up with, keeping consistent, and that's why they come to me. But it's that consistency component, but you also want to mix it up a bit to keep it entertaining, right? I believe that content should either be entertaining, information that, drives sales, but not all of it, right? You don't, you really got to have balance because you don't want to be too salesy. You know what I'm saying? So I like to mix
Right.
up the content, make it educational, make it entertaining, but ultimately with the goal of reflecting the brand in the most accurate way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people that branding is creating an experience around your product or your service, and your brand is a result of that experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And that reminds me of like what Red Bull is doing. They never post about their product at all. They just post about literally that experiences. And I think
Yeah.
I would say around 80% of the content that I put out for my clients is designated to get eyeballs on the brand or further attract and engage those eyeballs, right? I would
Yep.
say only like 20% or less is actually, buy my thing, right? And when it is
Right.
that 20%, it's, crafted very particularly.
Right. Right. So do you follow Gary Vee?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I watch him sometimes, but when I do watch him, like he's really good. Yeah.
Right. When what you're saying is it just made me think of the jab, 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 right hook. So value, 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 and then pitch.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Jab, 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 right hook.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to remember that
Yeah.
one. That's a good way to
That's
put it.
that's
Yeah.
the title of a book that he wrote, which I mean, I'm sure that he probably didn't sit down and write it, but he dictated it to someone else, no doubt.
Yeah, you know what I heard? I heard from one of his podcasts that, and I didn't know that was his book, by the way,
Mhm.
but he said, what did he say? He says that he speaks to write his book. Like he
Right.
voice records it and then transcribes it. I thought
Right.
that was funny because he was saying that people are like, oh my gosh, it sounds so much like you. And he's like, yeah, it's literally me talking.
Yeah, no doubt. I have no doubt in my mind that that's absolutely true. As you are doing a discovery call with a potential client and you're discovering what story they want to tell, is there a specific process that you take them through to kind of discover their brand? Or is it a certain set of questions, or in your discovery call, do you just organically kind of come up with the answers with them?
Yeah, and sometimes that is difficult when, some business owners really don't know, what is my brand? What are adjectives that would describe my brand? And the more literal things, the colors, fonts, some people don't have that concrete idea. It's always helpful when they do because all I have to do is implement
Sure.
it, which I mean, that isn't too easy, right? It has to be reflected in the content that I create, and that's, my craft. But sometimes it could be tough when the business owner really doesn't have that idea. And so, um, what I try to do is I try to help them. And I like to first ask them, what are the sort of deeper things? Like, what are like five adjectives that would describe your brand? Like, I think for one client, it was like welcoming, friendly, hardworking, you know, and we take those adjectives and what are going to be the literal things that reflect those sort of adjectives, right? Sort of manifest that in the fonts, the colors that we put out, right? Because different visual components reflect the adjectives of your brand. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's usually a process that we go through with clients that don't really have the sharpest idea on what their brand really is.
Yeah, ultimately branding is a creative endeavor, and some people are more
Hmm.
analytical brained and less creative brained, and it's very difficult for them to make a connection of like, I don't know what my brand is. I know what I do and I know my numbers, but I don't know what adjectives, they don't sit down and think about things like that. People like you and I who are on
Yeah.
the creative side, even though it seems like you have a nice mix of both because you are running your own business. So you're not only creative, but yeah, people who have that, they're in touch with that creative gene, then they are able to really
Hmm.
nail down and drive in on specific things about someone's brand and help them to discover what their brand is, even though, they've been running their business maybe 20 years, but they still don't have these core answers.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, and that's a great way to describe it. You could be running a business for a long time and, not know your colors, not know your fonts, even the deeper things, like, what really describes your brand? Like, what's your mission statement? What's your motto? What's all that stuff, right? And so that's something that is really a first step. And so I try to, walk my clients through that before working with them and really get to that information. And usually the best way of doing that is just, asking them questions, right? What would a friend describe your business as? What does, what customers do you generally attract, right? Like, different questions can really help find that. And then from that point, it's really just reflecting that in the content that we create.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Something that I have run into several times along the way in my many years of being around on this world um, is that some people are resistant to hiring out social media because they're afraid that it will not sound like them. How do you? I already
Hmm.
know this answer, but I do
Yeah.
want to address that specifically. So, how do you get around that? How do
Hmm.
you handle that
Hmm.
objection from people?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably one of the most valid points of resistance, I think, because it is a very difficult skill to be able to reflect both the tone and voice of a brand, right? And just to differentiate between those two terms to start, you know, the voice of the brand is what is consistent across the board, right? What is the main message of this brand? What is the thing that you should not really deviate from? Now, the tone can vary a bit from post to post, right? Just like people, everyone has emotions, right? They feel different ways at times, right? So the tone can vary, but it should still align with the overall brand voice. And so crafting content around that and distributing content to the right people based on that, it can be very difficult. And that's like the number one thing that a social media manager and strategist should be good at is aligning with the tone and voice of each brand. And if you look at our clients, the captions on the post, the copy, it isn't the same. It has a different vibe to it that really reflects who our clients' brands are. And back to, discovering that at the start, we really try and reflect that. And it's a completely valid point of resistance. But I think that it's one of the number one things that a social media manager should be good at. And that's my craft.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And you've proven during our conversation that you are good at pulling out what makes people different and integrating that into what you do. So,
Hmm.
like I said, I knew the answer, but I needed to ask it because someone along the line was going to be like, "How do I hire someone and overcome them, not sounding like me?" But if you find the right person, then you will not have that
Yeah.
problem. Another question that I wanted to ask you, because we come from two different generations, and we're seeing AI kind of unfold in front of our eyes right now. How do you
Hmm.
see, from your perspective as a very young entrepreneur, how do you see that shaping what you do going forward? Do you see that as being a thing that's going to take jobs away? Do you see that as a thing that you are welcoming with open arms? How do you view AI in your industry, in our industry going forward?
Yeah, so that's an amazing question, and I'm thankful to be asked that because AI, I think, is something that, like you said, we're different generations. Every generation interprets it differently, right? And I think a lot of older people can struggle to understand it, but coming from the younger generation and what my peers say, what I agree with is that AI, it might take away some jobs, right? I mean, there's so many different industries, but for the social media marketing industry, I think working with it rather than working against it will produce the most results because you can be so much more efficient if you leverage AI tools. And that's another thing that I spend money on month to month subscriptions, different AI tools for my clients because, getting into specifics, AI is great at providing a skeleton and ideas for content creation. And it's my job to fill in, the the meat on the bones basically, right? But AI can be a great outline. Now, you can go the complete other way and completely use AI to create content. That's not going to come across as human and that's ultimately not going to be effective because people can tell like, hey, that's ChatGPT,
Yes.
right? But if you use it carefully and you use it just as an outline, you can be so much more efficient and have great results with it. And I think that a lot of young people realize that because we use, AI tools a lot generally. And I think that's something that other generations should know is, try and work with it instead of against it.
I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. I hear a lot of people worrying that ChatGPT is going to take over the world, that AI is going to take over the world. And I mean, it might cause some issues, and it might, like you said, it might take some jobs. But I think that, in 2024 and 2025 and going forward, there are going to be new things unveiled by AI. We might not, have some jobs that are here now, but other jobs are going to come in the place of those. So I'm not scared of it. I'm embracing it. I love it. And I love what you said about it. I think that you're
Hmm.
exactly right. I think we use it as a tool to help give us some structure and some brainstorming, some ideas. Then we can put the meat on the bones, like you said. I do
Yep.
absolutely despise reading copy, and I'm like, ugh, you didn't even take time to edit it. It's literally like pasted from ChatGPT,
Yeah.
you're right. It can be an extremely effective and efficient tool that we can integrate into business. So I love your answer. That was exactly what I was hoping to hear from you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and to your point, like with LinkedIn especially, there's like AI tools to make like custom LinkedIn posts and like they're better than ChatGPT at making those LinkedIn posts, but you could still tell like this is AI. It might not look exactly like ChatGPT, but
right.
it really takes the human out of it, and that's something that we really need to maintain, I think.
So yeah, I'm gonna hang on that point for just a second. So the idea that it takes the humanity out of things, Matt and I,
Hmm.
that's my husband, we're having a conversation about
Hmm.
AI maybe a year ago when ChatGPT was kind of first really coming onto the mainstream scene, and we were talking about how cool it is, and everyone was sharing articles about ChatGPT, and then every YouTube video that you watched was like how I use ChatGPT, and I was just like, oh, you don't need a YouTube
Yep.
video for this. If you can use Google, you can use ChatGPT. But anyway, I have a whole soapbox on this. But we talked about how the humanity is removed from it, and there's something magical about the creativity that we have been given as humans. We're different from anything else on the planet that in that we can create things, and it's something that AI just doesn't have. And I don't think I personally believe that it won't ever have the same ability that a human will have, even though some people would argue with me on that point. It is missing that humanity. And I think that you have to breathe life back into it if you want it to be effective. So definitely, if anyone is listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go use ChatGPT to formulate my content for this month," like, do it, yeah, but please breathe that humanity back into it, or hire somebody like Asher, and he'll do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's about creating that structure, but putting your own spin on it because I define humanity in marketing terms as this. So think about the word perfection, right? Perfection, it's like the same thing as infinity, right? It's like an idea, but it's not actually quantitative, it's not achievable, it's literally perfection. And AI is like as close to that as you can get because it takes everything from the web and crafts it quote unquote perfectly, right? But think about what makes something unique, right? It's deviating from perfection, right? So
Yeah,
put your own spin on it, deviate from that perfection because if everything's perfect, everything's the same, right? And so you really want to not try and be perfect,
right.
try and be yourself or your brand self and deviate from that common idea of, oh, the copy needs to be perfect. I'm going to use Chat GPT for it. Like I
Right.
said, good structure, breathe the humanity into it, as you put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, branding is all about finding what makes you different and capitalizing on that.
Hmm.
Decommoditizing yourself by knowing what makes you different and telling people what makes you different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about that unique value proposition, 100%.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few more questions where I think I could talk to you for probably 2 more hours and still not be all the way through everything that I want to talk about. But uh, what has been your biggest hurdle in creating your own brand?
Yeah, so I'd say the big thing across the board, I'd say for myself and my clients, it would probably be um, the social media algorithm is always changing, right? And it's a lot of work keeping up with that. Um, Obviously, that's something that, every social media manager should be doing their research, but sometimes there are things that are behind closed doors that not everybody sees, different features that are tweaked around, just algorithmic changes on different platforms. For example, like I noticed that organic reach on TikTok has become, in my experience with my clients, a lot better, whereas Instagram, I feel like, has decreased in the past recently. So just little tweaks that I notice on certain platforms that, you know, even though, we keep up with our research, it can sometimes be tough. And so the big way to sort of, push through that is just keep creating that quality content, because no matter what algorithmic changes there are, no matter what, you know, interference there is, as long as you're creating good quality content that resonates with people, people will come back to that. They will find you. But yeah, the obstacle is probably those algorithmic changes. But there are ways that you can, stand strong amidst that, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a specific platform that you specialize in, or a set of platforms that you specialize in, or do you do any social media that a client wants you to do?
Yeah, so really my one of my mottos is there's no one size fits all to social media marketing, right? And so different clients want different things. I'd say I use most platforms. There are some that I don't use. I use Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube. Those are pretty much like the main five. Sometimes Twitter. I don't really do like Pinterest or Tumblr or Snapchat or some of those, but um, we use the majority of our platforms for our clients just because our clients are so different. I think for local businesses, Facebook is amazing, sending this to groups. So Facebook, hands down, for those types of clients. For clients that sell products online, like e-commerce, TikTok's great for that, user-generated content. So it's really different for everybody. And like I said, there's no one size fits all. So that's why we like to be flexible with the platforms that we have our clients on.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you said there is no one size fits all in social media, because that is absolutely correct. And something that I always tell people and encourage people to do is focus on the platforms. If they're not hiring someone like you to do it, focus on the platforms that they enjoy being on, because otherwise it's going to feel
Hmm.
like very cumbersome and a big chore, and it's going to end up being something that they can't be consistent with. So, yeah, you're right. No one
Yeah.
size fits all for sure. If you had to
Yeah.
sit down with someone who is your age and give them some advice on how to become an entrepreneur and how to find success in that world, whether they were wanting to get into branding or wanting to get into something else, what is the advice that you would give them?
Yeah, and that's a very important question because a lot of young people come to me and they're like, "How do I start a business, right? Where do I start? I have no idea what I'm doing." And years ago, I remember, I mean, I've been like an entrepreneur all my life, but I've always felt like stuck because it was all about where do I start, right? How do I find something that will gain traction? Um, and I think the obstacle that you really need to overcome is your own self-doubt, because really the way to start is just to execute, and the execution doesn't need to be strategic, right? You don't need to plan everything out from the start. I like to say that if you see the first step, you don't need to see the whole staircase, right? So the execution is really what matters. And if it doesn't work, and even if it's poorly planned, and you look back on it and you're like, oh man, I barely planned that out, that was a terrible idea, at least you learn something from it, right? It doesn't matter if it's planned perfectly. It matters that you learn, and eventually, you know, one of the shots you take will work out, right? As long as you keep trying.
Yeah.
So, my advice would simply boil down to just start, just do something. It doesn't have to be good, but just do it, learn from it, and then refine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that is absolutely correct. The starting is always the hardest. There's always the most resistance before you take that first step. So, giving that advice of just do something. Just find something to do and do
Hmm.
it and then learn from it and do the next thing after that. That is excellent advice. Is there a book that you have read along the way that's encouraged you?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I love to learn from videos. I really need to read more.
Oh, that's
Ooh, let's
okay. It
see.
it can be video content. It doesn't necessarily have to be a book.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, so I'm reading this book right now that's really good. This is just for social media, but it's called Content Inc. And it was given to me by a mentor of mine. And it's a really good book that talks about a content first strategy. A lot of people think it's product first, come up with an excellent product. And while an excellent product is important, this book talks about creating the brand first, creating your sort of personal brand, right? Because when people are attracted and engaged with you, you know, you can sell them pretty much anything. So I thought it was a really interesting spin on the traditional, start a business. I thought that book was really interesting, and I'm reading that right now.
Oh, I'm gonna add that to my list. I haven't read that one, but I love the premise because that is the dig the well before you're thirsty, right?
Hmm.
That
Exactly.
whole strategy is finding the people that you want to talk to and building a brand around yourself before you have something to sell. And really, you're right. Once you have so I call those, and well, it's not only me, but super fans. Those are the people who
Hmm.
will buy anything that you sell. And have you ever read, this is something else that you can add to your reading list. It's not a book, it's actually an essay, like from 2009 or something by Kevin Kelly. It's called A Thousand True Fans.
Thousand True Fan. I don't think I heard of
Mhm.
that, but I will have to check that out. And I love that
Yeah,
term of super fans. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Really creating that audience because you're right. I mean, you could totally, if people trust you, if people, you know, feel like you're providing value to them, they will reciprocate, right? And so I think that's what a lot of
absolutely.
people miss. And there's so many huge personal brands, you look at celebrities that, really they make their money in starting a business, right? It's not their acting
Mhm.
career. It's later when they start their business, they start a line of products. That's where they make their money. So it's all about creating that brand. I love how you put it, digging that well before you need the water.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't take credit for that one either. I'm not sure who that quote came from, but I'm pretty sure I read it in, one of Tim Ferriss's books. But it could have been
Oh
from
yeah, he's
anyone that
good.
was featured in that book, but yeah, that is a great strategy to have for sure. And when you start when you're so young, that is such an amazing time to start digging that well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, Asher, we are out of time for today. But before we leave, I want to give you the chance to tell people where they can follow you, where they can follow up with you if they're interested in services that you offer. And I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, check out my website, dahlgrensocial.com, DAHLGREN social.com. That's my business website. You can learn more about me on there. And I love helping other business owners. Business owners come to us when they need to delegate their marketing or they need some guidance with their social media strategies. So I'd love to hear from you. And I usually offer all of my clients a free proposal, which is a little bit of strategy just to get sort of your ducks in a row to figure out, what you should be focusing on with social media. So reach out to me on there. You can also find me on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, at Asher Dahlgren, at Dahlgren Social is my business page. So you can get in touch with me on there as well.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to link all of that in the description of the episode. Thank you, Asher, so much for being here today. It was a joy to have you. I know you were going to do big things in this world, and you've got so much time to accomplish all the things that you want to do. It's so great. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. Take care.
All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you in the next one. Hey, friends. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you hit the subscribe button because friends are fun and success is cool. And here you're going to find both of those. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave the show a review. And when you do, your review could be the next one that I read out loud on the show. Oh, and before you go, Check out the description box for tools and resources that you can use to make your brand extra, like our free Branding 101 Facebook group. And do you want to take it to the next level? Then check out the link to our mastermind group, The Extras, where you can connect with a high-level group of entrepreneurs through live group coaching, exclusive deals, private trainings, and so much more. My name is Alicia, and I teach entrepreneurs like you to create irresistible brands that can't be ignored. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Make your brand extra.